Good morning, everybody. We're going to wait just for 2 minutes to see, to allow people whose clocks aren't precisely on time to be able to catch up to us. If you're just joining, we're just going to wait for a couple of minutes, give people a chance to join. Let me ask the speakers to mute themselves while you're waiting to speak, so that we don't catch any stray noise. And we'll give folks 1 more minute. If you're just joining, we're going to start in about 20 seconds. All right. Good morning, everybody. We are here today to discuss a series of indictments that we have issued, and I just want to briefly introduce the speakers, and then we'll get started. I'm going to speak, then following me, we'll hear from the Anne Arundel County Chief of Police, William Lowry. And after that, we'll hear from Anne Arundel County State's Attorney Ann Colt Leitess. Following her will be Glenn Fueston, the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services. We're here today to announce the indictments of 15 different individuals. They're indicted on a host of different charges related to drug trafficking and sex trafficking. And what I'm about to say are all allegations. You'll find additional details in our indictments. Everything that we say in the indictments and that I'll say this morning and my colleagues will say are things that we have yet to prove in court, but we intend to do that. Now, this is about a gang that conducted criminal behavior primarily in the Brooklyn Park area of Anne Arundel County, but also in Baltimore County and Baltimore City. The investigation was initiated in 2019 when Anne Arundel County Police learned of a large organization selling drugs out of a local hotel, the Comfort Inn and Suites, hence the name Operation Too Close for Comfort. The leader of the organization was a man named David Brown. Brown and another defendant, Michael Copeland, are also charged with sex trafficking. Now, Brown used hotel staff to alert him when police came onto the premises of the hotel, or if a guest was suspected to be law enforcement or a member of a rival gang looking to encroach on Brown's territory. While some of the staff helped the gang, the management of the hotel was helpful to the investigation. In addition to operating a large-scale drug operation, Brown and Copeland forced women to engage in sex trafficking in exchange for their rooms and for drugs. Anne Arundel County detectives monitored the defendants for 8 months, tracking the activities at the hotel and in the surrounding areas. During the course of the investigations, detectives observed members obtaining and distributing the drugs, watched purchases from members of the organization, and observed hand-to-hand drug transactions. Police initially had difficulty making undercover buys because David Brown insisted that if he did not know the customer personally, they had to use drugs in his presence. During the investigation, police learned that drugs sold by this organization led to overdoses, and some of those overdoses were fatal. David Brown actually lived in the Comfort Inn and Suites, except for a brief period of time after apparently a fatal overdose. He moved out, then moved back in. He had control of multiple rooms at one time, including an entire floor. He used these rooms for drug sales, to hide drugs, to hide money, and for the sex trafficking victims to use for what the gang called their dates. Now, members of the gang also used a neighboring hotel to conduct some of their drug activity. Upon the arrests of David Brown, Michael Copeland, and other indicted members of the organization, detectives located and seized, among other things, and Fritz, if you could put up the pictures, this would be a good time to do it. So they seized 2 assault rifles, 7 handguns, 502 grams of crack cocaine, 119 grams of powder cocaine, over 3,000 grams of marijuana, over 200 grams of heroin fentanyl, 38 grams of MDMA, more than 1,300 grams of methamphetamine, 13 strips of Suboxone, and $27,000 in cash. I want to say special thanks, excuse me, I want to say special thanks to Kelly Hooper-McCamey, my Assistant Attorney General, and Jennifer Dowd, Assistant State's Attorney in Anne Arundel County. They did outstanding work, and we deeply appreciate it. Now, I'm going to turn the platform over to the Chief of Police for Anne Arundel County, William Lowry. And Chief Lowry, I want to say special thanks to your detectives, whom we are not going to name. They were dogged, they were smart, they were adaptable and courageous. Thank you very much for their work. Chief, take it away.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I really appreciate the kind and words for the members of our police department. Before I make a couple of comments, I want to thank Anne Arundel County State's Attorney Ann Leitess and the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Glenn Fueston. The cooperation and the communication between these entities and more was critical for where we're at right now in the stage of this investigation. Obviously, I won't talk about the specifics of it, but what I will say is in a narcotic investigation like this that deals with sex trafficking, not only are we making an impact on the criminal enterprise itself, but I will guarantee the folks that are listening that the activities of these officers in their investigative techniques and cooperation, again, with the Attorney General and the State's Attorney's Office, is saving lives. Our first and foremost priority as law enforcement is protection and saving the lives of people. And really, that's what this is about. It's hard to quantify by taking that amount of narcotics off the street, how many lives we're saving. It's hard to quantify by these arrests how many lives we're saving, but also through the sex trafficking, there is a ripple effect in these types of investigations. So I can't thank enough the investigators from our Narcotics and Special Investigations Division. I'm kind of long in the tooth as a law enforcement official. I did this decades ago, and I can imagine how much more complicated these cases are. But the time, the effort, the sacrifice that these detectives make from being away from their families and from the concerted efforts and the long hours, the end result is where we're at here today, and maybe even more. So the members of our police department, I couldn't be more thankful for. And I want the community that's just listening here to understand sometimes the actions of our police officers are behind the scenes, but it doesn't mean that they're not dedicated and hardworking. So I really thank those folks. And again, I've done these before, but the cooperation between the Attorney General's office and then with Ms. Ann Leitess from the state's attorney is critical here. So thank you for allowing me to participate in this. But I can guarantee you, folks' lives have been saved as a result of this investigation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chief. I want to remind the audience that if you have questions, you can put them in the comment section and we will get to them afterwards. I do see that somebody has asked us to repeat the name of the hotel. It's the Comfort Inn and Suites. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the state's attorney of Anne Arundel County, Ann Colt Leitess. Ann, thanks again for your great work in this action.
Thank you, Attorney General Frosh. I would like to thank you, your office, the Anne Arundel County Police Department, and Police Chief Lowry, as well as the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention, Mr. Fueston. This partnership is part of the Maryland Criminal Investigation Network, the EMSIN team. And I think this case illustrates just how powerful a unified prosecution strategy can be when it's coupled with the foundation of a thorough police investigation. That partnership has the power to disrupt criminal enterprises that reach far beyond our local borders and harm all of our communities. And while this case is charged in Anne Arundel County, the impact of this case reached into Baltimore City and Baltimore County, hurting their communities as well. And as we have seen in the indictment and the facts in this case, which will be presented in court, that many of the women involved in this case were addicted to drugs themselves, and they were trafficked in the same way that the drugs were trafficked in this case. This joint investigation resulted in the arrest and indictment of 15 people who are presumed innocent unless and until they're proven guilty in a court of law. And I'm happy to say that this indictment of these 15 individuals, these cases will take place in Anne Arundel County with a team of prosecutors from the Anne Arundel County State's Attorney's Office, as well as prosecutors from the Attorney General's Office. So as a team with the Anne Arundel County Police Department, I look forward to presenting these cases in our courthouse. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Ann. Now we're going to turn to our fourth partner. Glenn Fueston heads the Governor's Office on Crime Prevention. They provided a lot of the resources used in this investigation. So Glenn, take it away.
Thank you, Attorney General Frosh. I just want to thank everybody for the collaboration and the partnership here. And it's an honor to represent Governor Hogan and the administration, but working together with the Attorney General, the state's attorney, Colt Leitess, and Chief Lowry to present on this successful operation. One of Governor Hogan's top priorities and the priorities of my office is to provide support to law enforcement wherever we can. Those individuals that are on the front lines, risking their lives to protect each one of us every day. And this is a shining example of that. The governor announced the EMSIN project, or the Maryland Criminal Intelligence Network, in December of 2017. And it was a process to provide funding, but also to encourage coordination and collaboration between law enforcement and criminal justice agencies, including state's attorney's office and other departments. And I think this is, again, a great example. Anne Arundel County was one of the first adopters of the EMSIN coalitions, along with Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and with Prince George's County. And the goal is to bring together local, state, and federal resources in order to combat violent crime here in the state. Since Governor Hogan announced the EMSIN back in 2017, 13 law enforcement coalitions have banded together to disrupt or dismantle over 800 criminal organizations. Since the start of this initiative, our partners in Anne Arundel County have made over 100 arrests, disrupted and dismantled 49 criminal organizations, and secured 50 indictments. And then also have seized nearly 4 dozen firearms. So obviously the impact of this collaboration and cooperation is very apparent. And the case that the Attorney General outlined for us today is a shining example of what we can do through collaboration, coordination, and through information sharing. The EMSN Coalition partners have embraced working together not only to arrest and prosecute violent repeat offenders, but to target and dismantle criminal networks that take advantage of the vulnerable people in our communities. The EMSN partners have played a critical role in stopping the distribution of drugs, including heroin and fentanyl, that's finding its way into our streets. And we're very grateful, again, for the men and women that keep our neighborhoods safe on a day-to-day basis and are dismantling these organizations. So we're very proud, again, to support everybody in this operation and look forward to our continued collaboration. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. I see a couple of questions in the chat that I can address easily. Someone asked that we repeat the name of the hotel again. It's the Comfort Inn and Suites. I believe it's in the Brooklyn Park area of Anne Arundel County. Someone else asked if we would repeat the list of items that were seized. There were 2 assault rifles. Yeah, put the picture back up. 2 assault rifles, 7 handguns, 502 grams of crack cocaine, 119 grams of powder cocaine, over 3,000 grams of marijuana, over 200 grams of heroin and fentanyl, 38 grams of MDMA, that's ecstasy, more than 1,300 grams of methamphetamine, 13 strips of Suboxone, and $27,000 in cash. Now, I apologize for the fact that we don't have the ability to provide live questioning. We thought it better, given the pandemic that we're in, to do this by video conference. But we will take questions as they come in the chat. And if anybody has any questions, please, let's hear them now. Someone asked the street value of the drugs. I don't think we have an answer to that at this point. So someone else has asked how the investigation began, and it began in, I think it was December of 2019, because the Anne Arundel County Police had noticed a lot of drug sales in that area. And Chief, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
yes, sir. Yes, sir. It actually started, I believe, in May of 2019 when the investigators initiated the actions that they were talking about this morning. So it was actually May of 2019 at the Comfort Inn. I believe it's in the 6900 block of Baltimore, Annapolis Boulevard.
Are there other questions? So I'm afraid that we got a question about how the officers were able to infiltrate the gang. We cannot answer that question. She also asked if the chief can talk a little bit about the investigation. I'm not sure how much more we can add, but Chief, whatever you think.
Yeah, I think that we've already talked about, since we're in the prosecutorial portion of this investigation, we can't get into the detail, the minutia of it. I can just tell folks in these types of investigations, and again, it'll kind of reiterate what I've already said. This is extremely manpower intensive, the number of hours that these investigators put into these types of situations. And I just can't, it's hard for folks sometimes to understand the sacrifices that they make, but it's intelligence led. There's intelligence gathering every day. The detectives look and screen this and working in concert, again, with the Attorney General and the State's Attorney's Office. And I don't want to say it's typical, but it is kind of typical of narcotic investigations or sex crime investigations. They're usually lengthy, but it's a lot of coordination, a lot of intelligence gathering, and then where we're culminating today. So that's about the best I could give you, whoever asked the question. I appreciate the question, but in cases like this, we really, really can't get down into the minutia of it.
Okay, there are a bunch more questions. Someone asked if the management of the Comfort Inn and Suites would be charged. And the answer to that is no. They were cooperative. The management was cooperative. Some of the staff was helping the gang. There's a question about how many shootings were the gang was the gang connected to, and we cannot answer that question at this point. And Megan Clardy asks, how do we know that Baltimore City and County are the only other communities affected? Could this have a wider range? I'm going to let Kelly Hooper-McCamey on my staff take a swing at that. Unless Ann or Chief, do you have a response you want to make to that? I think.
No, I think Kelly's the appropriate person to answer that one.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. This was extensive investigation. We do typically know about the Baltimore County and Baltimore City aspects of this investigation. We cannot comment on other areas within Baltimore or within Maryland overall. We do know, however, that members of this organization did travel around the state and out of state to bring these drugs into our state. So we know there are several areas involved. But for the purpose of this indictment, we did focus on what was happening in Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, and Baltimore City.
Heather Matarazzo asks about the Comfort Inn in Brooklyn Park. Yes, that's the one we're talking about. Someone asked, was this a local gang or a bigger part of something else? I don't think we can address that this morning either. And Megan Clardy asked, any idea how long the gang was operating from the hotel? And Chief, either Chief Lowry or State's Attorney Leitess, would either of you like to address that?
I can say from the police department's perspective, again, the case was initiated in May of 2019, so that kind of gives you a timeline about not only how extensive this was, but how long-term investigation it is. And the tentacles of these types of investigations they're not just restricted to that one geographical area. Again, when you're distributing fentanyl or heroin or involving handguns, like I said, there's a ripple effect not only throughout Anne Arundel County, but out through the Baltimore, DC area. So it's one of those things that's kind of hard to put your finger on. But again, this started back in May of 2019.
All right. Are there any other questions? There do not appear to be. So let me say thanks again to all of our partners, Glenn Fueston, Chief Lowry, State's Attorney Leitess. Really appreciate everything that you've done. And to those who've been listening and watching, thanks very much for joining us. If you have further questions, you can contact our offices. We'd be glad to help. Oh,
Thank you, sir.
wait.
Thank you.
We got one more question. Brooklyn, Maryland is more on the Baltimore side. Brooklyn Park is in Anne Arundel. It's the Brooklyn Park area where the Comfort Inn and Suites are located. So that's the one. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Josh.